Today I started writing a book called Inflation Investing, and this is some tidbits. I'm summarizing some things I found. I've written about close to the first 3 chapters out of 10 so far. And I have to get most of it done this summer. So, money, currency, inflation definitions. Money and currency are used interchangeably. It should not be. Money is really more of a theoretical construct, and its value is dependent on the size of your economy. You cannot create money. You constantly, the government creates money. The government can do no such thing. It can create lots of currency, which it usually does through printing, but it doesn't have to even do that. You can do it electronically. Money increases with the size of your economy, and only policies that actually make your economy bigger increases the actual amount of money in the economy. So you need to think in those terms first of all. Currency is something that's used to represent money, and in our case, it's the dollar bill or $5 bill or $15, $20 bill. And creating more currency does not create more money. Now, the Treasury is printing currency like no tomorrow. They are not making any extra money. All they are doing is devaluing the existing money, the currency that exists by making more. Gold and silver are also currencies. Now, this is also an important insight. They are not money, they are also a currency. However, they are a very different currency. And their currency increases in value because basically the supply is growing at a slower rate than the growth of the economy, unlike the supply of dollars or British pounds or euros or any number of other currencies which are growing much faster than their respective economies. So think of gold and silver as currency, but like the real currencies. And currencies that grow in value as opposed to lose their value. Now, the definition of inflation we use is inflation is a currency losing its value. This is not the definition most economists use. They have many different other definitions. However, unless you are shopping and investing in ivory tower fantasy land, you should use this definition. The others will do you no good. With rare exceptions, and one I'm listing here, the Black Plague in the 14th century Europe, inflations are always caused by governments creating too much currency for the size of their economies. Always, always, always. This has happened hundreds or thousands of times in history. Over and over and over and over again. And have we learned anything? Have governments learned anything from this? No. Okay, a few examples of major inflations. The Romans really invented large-scale inflation somewhere between 200 BC, 300 AD. The first large-scale coin debasement, basically they made their coins smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. They took out the gold and silver and put in less and less and less and less. So over time this created a lot of inflation because they created a lot more coins that had the same value listed on the top, but you needed a lot more than to actually buy anything. And you really couldn't have large-scale inflation until the Romans came along because you needed first an economy, and you needed some type of money, and you needed a central government that had a monopoly on issuing that money. These are all very key concepts, that the government has a monopoly on issuing the money. Once that happens, it's over. And maybe over hundreds of years later, but it'll be over eventually. Another case, and this is actually one of the rare exceptions to governments creating too much money, was lots of gold and silver flowed into Europe from the South America and Central America in the 16th, 17th centuries, from the Spanish and Portuguese colonies, and this increased the supply of currency tremendously. So the price of everything eventually in Europe in these 200 years went up a lot, and it stayed up permanently because that money stayed in the system permanently. Now, this wasn't really the government debasing the coinage or printing more dollars. It was just a lot more gold and silver appeared, the supply increased, so inflation happened also. So this is one reason I say gold and silver are really currency, and you have to think of them as currency. You increase their supply tremendously, like paper, the same thing will happen. You'll get lots of inflation. Now, this cannot be done today. We basically have mined almost all the gold and silver that exists, and the supply can increase maybe 2% a year right now, 1.7% last time. So the supply each year can increase a little, but only a little. Whereas we can print all the paper dollars we want. Okay, another big case of major inflation is the U.S. The Revolutionary War, there was something called the continental currency that devalued to nothing, and there's still a phrase in the English language called not worth a continental. That means something that's worthless. And in fact, the U.S. invented paper money hyperinflation. Now, have you ever heard that? Have you ever read that in any history book? You have not. We also had another incident of hyperinflation. That was in the Civil War. The Southern currency devalued to zero the moment they lost the war. So prices, were heading toward infinity before that. Now, I actually gave a talk maybe 2 years ago or less at the academia, actually. And I said, and I'm talking about inflation in the United States, and some guy actually said, well, there's never been any big inflation in the United States ever. And I said, yes, there was in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. And I said, just because it didn't happen in your lifetime does not mean it didn't exist. And this guy was very adamant originally. No, no such thing as that. So, history began before everyone in this room was born here. So the other big inflations post-war tends to create inflation. Lots of inflations follow. World War II, Germany, the famous hyperinflation, the Weimar Republic. This is one of the biggest, the most relevant inflation for us because Germany was an industrialized economy, advanced industrialized economy, just like we are, and they had a hyperinflation. Now, it's generally thought this can't happen in advanced industrial economy. Well, here's an example where it did happen. And Russia, when the communists took over, Russia had not just a war, but it had a civil war. The communists purposely devalued the money and drove it to nothing. That was part of their agenda. And even doing that, they had less hyperinflation than Germany, which was not trying to devalue the money. Then after World War II, there were even more hyperinflations. Hungary, which had the worst case of hyperinflation in the history of the world and will probably remain #1 forever. They had octillion percent inflation in 1 year. And it just is this is probably the theoretical limit that you could not exceed. So, I mean, this is quite amazing, and it's very, it's interesting that the way it happened is they accidentally indexed the currency to inflation, and it's believed it was an accident. And the Russians controlled Hungary at this time. It was right after World War II. And then, because of that indexation, it drove the currency to a worthless level as fast as theoretically possible. And indexation is very bad for inflation, Well, once your currency goes to octillion percent times whatever, people don't use it anymore. Oh, well, actually, that's a good point. Well, one of the things that caused it is the Nazis stole all the gold from Hungary in the reserve bank. And the Americans actually found the gold and gave it back to them a year later. And that's one thing that actually ended. So they created brand new money. Inflation's always end by new money being created. If we have a dollar in the United States, the new dollar will be created. Or some other currency name. I mean, Brazil is actually the all-time winner of creating new currencies. They created a new currency. They were using the pengo, or how would you pronounce it? P-E-N-G-O. Pingo actually has two unlocked somewhere. With the O, like pingo or something. And they replaced it with the forint, yes. So they have a brand new name, a completely different name. The gold came back. I mean, this is an unusual inflation in many, many ways. It's not typical. It's not likely someone would come and steal the $5 worth of gold in the United States and point out.